Time has a peculiar way of slipping by unnoticed. I recall relocating to the city during a challenging period in my life. The unfamiliar streets and the skyline filled with both hope and uncertainty felt overwhelming. I decided to sell my car and embrace a simpler lifestyle where everything I needed was within walking distance. I indulged in purchasing a Harley, a dream bike that became my refuge whenever I needed to clear my mind. My daily routine consisted of walking to work and spending quiet evenings alone in my apartment. After the turbulence of my previous relationship, I found the solitude to be a welcome change. Mornings especially felt like a new beginning. I'd leave early while the city was still stirring, relishing the calm before the demands of my job took over. My role at a manufacturing firm became the most stable aspect of my life, yet small moments would remind me of how swiftly time was passing. As I sent out a letter, it hit me that a whole year had gone by. Time flies, I mused. As I continued my walk to work, I chose a condo close to the office for convenience, with shops and restaurants within easy reach. My motorcycle was always ready for a weekend getaway. At 6 a.m., the streets were serene, and I made it to the office in less than 15 minutes. After brewing some coffee, I sifted through my emails, mostly spam, but a few contained important updates. By 7:10, I had reviewed the sales from the previous night's production. The office gradually filled up as I carried on with my work. In my role as purchasing manager, overseeing about a third of our 175 employees, I'd been with the company for 6 years. Lately, I was gaining recognition as a rising star. My workdays were long, typically starting around 6 a.m. and ending after 7:30 p.m. My job had become central to my life. Today, being the end of the month, I meticulously checked the inventory, postponed 2 deliveries, and ensured all shop orders were finalized. My boss, Ken, came by as he was leaving. "What are you still doing here? You've done an excellent job. Go home," he said. "I'm just finishing up," I replied. "Seriously, take a break. The office is closed tomorrow for fumigation. Enjoy your weekend," Ken said as he left. I finally left after 8 o'clock. On my walk home, I noticed couples enjoying drinks and dinner while I headed back to my condo alone. It was a renovated 2-bedroom unit with a large balcony overlooking a park and a lake. I liked taking early morning walks around the lake on weekends. When I got home and saw the blinking light on my answering machine, I didn't bother checking the messages, I just deleted them. I grabbed an open bottle of my favorite wine from the fridge, uncorked it, and took a crystal glass from the cabinet. I had started using the good glasses recently, realizing there was no point in saving them if one broke. With wine in hand, I turned on the TV and opened my laptop. AOL notified me of 6 new emails, 2 from eBay, 1 from my parents, 2 from my friend Nick, and 1 spam about making money from home. I'll check them tomorrow, I thought, heading to the kitchen. I had renovated the kitchen shortly after moving in, making it look like something out of a gourmet magazine. It had a 6-burner stove, double oven, stainless steel fridge, granite countertops, and a wine cooler. After struggling to sleep for a while, I realized I needed to exhaust myself physically to rest, so I converted the 2nd bedroom into a home gym. Every night, I worked out hard between 9 o'clock and 10 p.m., then took a cold shower, had one last glass of wine, and went to bed. Over the past year, I had slimmed down from 195 to 175 pounds, becoming lean and fit. Dinner was simple as always. I didn't cook after getting home late, so I had local meals prepped and frozen for me. Tonight's was steak, peppers, and rice. Ready in minutes, with another glass of wine, I watched the news, but it was the same depressing cycle of violence, scandals, and reality shows that insulted my intelligence. I turned off the TV and headed to my workout room. I warmed up with 20 minutes on the treadmill and stretched for 15 before starting my real workout, 30 to 45 minutes of punches and kicks on a heavy bag. Each punch felt like I was releasing a piece of myself. As a kid, I trained in Kung Fu at a strict dojo near my house. After months of begging, my dad enrolled me, but it was much tougher than I expected. The sensei didn't tolerate slacking and pushed us hard. After 2 months, I wanted to quit, but my dad refused. I paid for a year, and you're finishing it, he said, telling me to toughen up. After that, I gave it my all, and that's when I met Nick. He was a year older and much bigger than me, but we became best friends. We trained together, holding pads for each other, though Nick often complained that my kicks were too strong. "Ease up, you don't have to kick me through the wall," Nick complained, but I was determined. In 2 months, we could spar in class, and I couldn't wait. My first session was a disaster. I got knocked out by 3 other students. After 3 months of hard work, I finally won a match and never looked back, training for another 4 years before quitting. Nick only stuck with it for 2 years. By the time I earned my second-degree black belt, I was more interested in girls. Though my sensei begged me to stay, I was done, and we parted as friends. I visited the dojo occasionally but eventually stopped until a couple of months ago. It was almost 11 o'clock, and I was drenched in sweat after my workout. I peeled off my clothes, threw them in the hamper, and stepped into the shower. The cold water revived me, and as I looked at my red, swollen hands, I washed away the grime. I'd cut my hair short and was sporting a 10-day-old beard. After shampooing and brushing my teeth, I dried off and wiped the mirror. I saw my reflection but wondered if I was truly alive. On Saturday morning, I emailed Nick. "If Lisa hasn't made you sell your bike, meet me for breakfast at 8 o'clock Sunday at the Mom and Pop place on 321. I love my Harley. I had driven sports cars, but nothing compared to the freedom of being on my bike. The engine's rumble, the wind, and the feeling of vulnerability were just what I needed. I ditched my helmet months ago, wearing only shades and sometimes a cap. By 9:30 on Saturday, I hit the road. Only one other biker passed me, giving the peace sign. Most casual riders had stored their bikes for the winter, but we hardcore ones waited for the first snowfall. Needing an oil change, I headed to the dealer. "Just an oil change," I told the tech. He said it would take about an hour, so I browsed the showroom. A lime green custom chopper caught my eye. I swung a leg over and admired it. The salesman approached. "Sweet ride," I said. He told me it had a 2008 engine with only 2,200 miles and mostly custom Harley parts. He even offered me a test ride. "I probably can't afford it," I said. He mentioned the owner was open to trades, so I told him about my 2008 Ultra. Next thing I knew, I was cruising down the road on the chopper. It handled like a dream despite the extra vibration when I returned the salesman's call and asked what he thought. "A little more vibration than I'd like, but it rides well," I said. He offered to get the owner on the phone. When I asked why he was selling, the owner explained that his wife hated the rear fender pad, so they had to get something more comfortable. "I made that mistake once, never again," I said. "You got any saddlebags for it?" I asked. "Yeah, and a small bolt-on windshield if you're interested," he replied. 30 minutes later, the couple arrived at the dealership with the bike's accessories. After some negotiation, we made the deal. 45 minutes and $8,000 later, I drove off with their bike and they left with mine, definitely a win-win. I scheduled an appointment for the following week to swap out the seat and add a rear shock. After 100 miles, my back couldn't handle the hardtail ride anymore. When I pulled into the diner, Nick was already waiting with a coffee. "When did you get this beauty?" he asked, checking out my new ride. "Yesterday. Traded my Ultra for it. What do you think?" "Damn, it's awesome," he replied, spending the next 20 minutes admiring it and wishing he had the nerve to make a similar trade. "Lisa would eliminate me if I brought this home," he said. After ordering breakfast, I filled Nick in on the trade and we caught up. Business was down for me due to the economy, but I told him we'd still have a strong fourth quarter after securing new distributors. Nick shared that his company had laid off nearly 10% of workers and they were just trying to avoid bankruptcy. "I never thought I'd be happy just to have a job," he said. "I keep telling the guys to be thankful they're still working." We talked about Lisa's job at the hospital, which was secure but exhausting. Sometimes she's so tired I have to pick her up at 3 a.m. because she can't drive home, Nick said. Nick hesitated before telling me that Lisa and Carol still kept in touch and that Carol occasionally asked about me. Don't, I said sharply. I don't want to hear it. He switched the topic and mentioned a rumor about me getting in trouble at the dojo. I heard you clean house with Sensei's new fighter, he said, laughing. It wasn't a big deal, I replied. He was cocky after dropping someone in the ring, so I gave him a couple of sidekicks. Maybe I was a bit too forceful, but he wasn't guarding himself well. Nick laughed. You never do anything halfway. We chatted for another hour before Nick had to go. He invited me to dinner with Lisa's family, but I declined, citing work. You can't hide forever, Nick teased before taking my bike for a test ride. When he came back wide-eyed, he said, I need one of these. It's way faster than my wide glide. Though I wouldn't want to take a sharp corner on it. I told Nick to stay calm and not follow my crazy lead. He headed home and I took off for a long afternoon ride on my new green bike. Around 6:30, I stopped at a diner for a quick meal, a burger, onion rings, and a Dr. Pepper, while keeping an eye on my bike through the window. A group of girls parked next to it, and one climbed on, which didn't sit well with me. How'd you like it if I sat in your car with my feet on the dash? I asked, surprising them. Two jumped off, and the one on the bike asked if it was mine. Yes, and didn't anyone teach you not to touch other people's stuff? I said. I didn't know. My mom and my dad would have hotwired it, she replied nonchalantly. How's it ride, and how does anyone sit on that tiny back seat? It rides fine, and I don't care about the back seat since no one rides there anyway, I said, getting annoyed. Now get off my bike. Like I'd ruin it with my 105 pounds, she shot back. And I wouldn't ride with you even if you begged. She walked into the diner, and I shook my head and returned to my table. The girls sat at the counter, occasionally glancing my way. When I was paying the bill, the skinny brunette approached me. I'm giving you another chance, she said. You look like a lost puppy and I love puppies. You can give me a ride home as an apology for being rude. Surprised, I didn't object. 5 minutes later, we were riding back into town. The faster I went, the tighter she held on. After arriving at her place, she complained about the seat and handed me her number. Call me when you fix the seat, she said, walking up to her apartment. By the way, I'm Pam. Good-looking but pushy. I thought slipping her number into my pocket at the end of the month went well. I secured a 5% price cut from 2 vendors, which earned me some praise. Can't even mention I might get a company car, keep it up and there might be a bonus this year, he said. I got a new gel-filled seat and rear shock for my bike, making it much more comfortable. I also asked the dealer about a better passenger seat and ended up buying a quick-release one for occasional use, even though it cost a fortune, Harley parts always do. I toyed with Pam's number for a week. I hadn't dated much in the past year, just 3 dates, and one was with a female customer for business. The other 2 dates didn't go anywhere. I hated blind dates. Hello, Pam, it's Steve, I said, wondering if she'd remember me. Steve who? She asked. Green Chopper, I replied. I thought you were a lost cause. What took you so long to call? Work's been busy, and I had to get a few things done to the bike, I explained. There's a ride this Saturday. Want to join? Did you fix the seat? She asked. Let's just say it's big enough now, I joked. All right, I'm in. What time? 9:30, dress warm, it'll be cold. Highs in the 50s. Got a leather jacket and boots. I'm good. Just don't be late. I'll meet you out front, she said, ending the call before I could fumble more small talk. It felt like I was a teenager asking someone out for the first time. Saturday came, and I bundled up in heavy leathers and gloves. It was freezing, so I had to stop and put on a stocking cap. By the time I picked up Pam, I was 5 minutes late. You're late, she said immediately. Only by 5 minutes, I replied. Late is late. Now let me see this new seat, she said, inspecting the bike. I bolted on the seat, and we headed out. Pam held on tightly, her face pressed against my back as we rode. When we got to the dealership, she rubbed her numb, cold face and said, shivering, I handed her a neoprene mask. This will help, it has a skull on it. She complained, it's for warmth, not fashion. Let's just say it's big enough now, I said, slightly amused. The ride began at 10 o'clock, lasting 2 hours with about 30 bikes, mostly single riders. We returned to the dealership by noon, and after declining the cold food they offered, I asked Pam, "Want to grab lunch?" "Yes, but somewhere warm," she replied. We went to Denny's, where Pam warmed her hands on the coffee mug. "That was fun, though cold," she said. "Do you do this often?" "Not as much as I used to. I used to ride to Sturgis every year, but it's been a while." "I've seen pictures. Is it really that big?" "Bikes everywhere and it's a non-stop party for 2 weeks. My buddy Nick and I camped out once, but now I prefer more comfort." "What do you do for work?" she asked. "I'm a purchasing manager." "How about you?" "I teach art and do freelance work. It doesn't pay much, but I enjoy it." "Are you seeing anyone right now?" "Why?" "Are you applying?" she teased, noticing me squirm. "Relax. I had someone, but it didn't work out. Now I'm just dating here and there." "What about you?" "Same. Had someone special, but it ended badly. Haven't dated much in the past year." "So you're basically a born-again maid," she joked. "That's good. Less risk of catching anything, unlike the players who sleep with anyone." "What makes you think I want to take you to bed? With a body like mine?" "Why wouldn't you?" she laughed. "Now that the personal stuff's out of the way, let's see what else we have in common." For 2 days, Pam and I talked about our likes, dislikes, and shared what we were comfortable with. She wasn't thrilled that I only mentioned having one bad marriage, but we got along well. Over the next 3 weekends, I got to know her better. We liked the same foods, I ran while she rollerbladed, and we agreed to disagree on my workout room and her favorite band. "Want to go to a club Saturday?" she asked. "Some friends of mine are going, and I want you to meet them." "I'm not much of a dancer," I said. "Most guys can't dance, just fake it," she smiled. We hadn't gone beyond kissing, and when she invited me to stay over, I politely declined, saying I wasn't ready yet. "Don't worry, I'll be gentle," she teased. On Saturday, Pam drove, saying, "I'm not freezing on your bike tonight." The club was crowded, but we found a decent table. Pam's friends were nice, and we were having fun until I ran into my worst nightmare. "Hi, Chicken Dan," sneered Dan. "Got a new girl? Did the last one dump you?" He moved closer, taunting me. "Pam, meet Craphead Dan. He's a bodybuilder whose brains were fried by steroids," I said, as his friends pulled him away. I couldn't resist adding, "I hear after the gym closes, the body shoulders blow each other." Dan snapped, flipping our table and causing chaos. The bouncers kicked all of us out. "Stay inside, Pam," I told her. "You don't want to be part of this. I'll call you later." Outside, Dan and his buddy started pushing me, afraid of me. "Dan needs backup," I taunted. Dan swung wildly, missing every punch while I dodged and slapped him in mockery. When he rushed me, I sidestepped and kicked his knee with a crack, then shot him with a spin kick to the chest. As he struggled to rise, I kicked his jaw, shattering it along with his nose. One of his buddies grabbed me from behind, but I stomped on his foot and slammed my head into his face, breaking his nose. He dropped, and I looked for the other guy, but he had disappeared. I walked over to Dan, moaning on the ground, grabbed his hair, leaned in, and whispered, "Tell Tom if I find him, it'll be worse." I let his head fall to the ground and kicked him in the groin before walking away. Then I saw Pam standing with her mouth open. "I told you not to come out here," I said, grabbing her arm. We need to go before the police show up. I quickly guided her away from the scene. We hurried to the parking garage and found Pam's car. I opened her door, pushed her into the passenger seat, and sped off toward my condo. The ride was silent as Pam stared at me. "Steve, what was that all about?" she began, but I cut her off. "Parking the car. Not tonight. We'll talk later, but not now," I said, holding up my hand. "Are you okay to drive?" "I'm fine, but not tonight," I interrupted, surprising her. "I'll call you." I got out, glanced back to make sure she was okay, then headed into my building. Inside, I slammed the door and threw my keys against the wall. "God damn it, Carol, I hate you!" I screamed, ripping off my jacket and punching the wall over and over. The next morning, I woke up around 6 a.m., sitting on the floor of my workout room, still in my clothes, drenched in sweat. My mind was numb, but my hands were throbbing, cut, swollen, and red. The ice water stung as I soaked my hands, alternating between heat and cold for hours to reduce the swelling. Thankfully, nothing was broken, but I knew I wouldn't be hitting the heavy bag anytime soon. Later, I found some old ointment for my wrists, though there wasn't much left. At least it's Sunday, I thought. A day to rest, unless someone comes knocking. 2 weeks later, the police finally found me. "Steve Moore?" one of the officers asked at my door. "Yes," I replied. "There's been a formal complaint. We need you to come to the station and give a statement," the second officer said. I agreed, grabbed my jacket, and spent the next 2 hours explaining everything. Yes, I knew Dan. No, I didn't know the other two. Dan started the fight in the club, and they attacked me outside. I was defending myself. "There are witnesses, ask the people at our table and the bouncers." The officers confirmed my story, but one was still angry. "You almost eliminated one guy, and the other will be on crutches for months. You didn't need to knock them out like that." I was afraid for my life. How did I know they didn't have a weapon? "I just wanted to end it quickly," I said. "You taunted Dan into throwing the first punch, then knocked him senseless." "What did he do to deserve that?" the officer asked. "You wouldn't understand unless you were there. Now, if I'm not being charged, I'd like to go home." Nick picked me up. "They say you nearly knocked 2 guys out," he said as we left the station. "Not both, just one." "I don't want to talk about it," I replied. "Maybe you should talk to someone about your anger," Nick suggested. "I don't have anger issues." "Let it drop," I snapped. "Okay, I'm just worried about you," Nick said. "I know. It's been a long night. Just don't bring it up again." There were 3 more messages from Pam on my machine, and like before, I deleted them. But she didn't give up. For the first 3 weeks, she called 5 times a week, then dropped to 3, 2, and finally once a week, always on Fridays. "It's me, Pam, again," her message always began. "Just checking if you're free for dinner or a chat tomorrow. Oh, and starting next month, I'll be waiting on your doorstep instead of calling. Just a heads up. Good night." This girl is persistent. I muttered, deleting the message. She can't be serious, or could she? I fell back into my usual routine: work, home, eat, work out. Nick called a few times, inviting me to dinner or to catch a game, but I usually declined. I spent Thanksgiving with Nick and Lisa, sending them a list of topics we wouldn't discuss. Dinner was tense as always, with the unspoken elephant in the room. Afterward, I thanked them and took a cab home. The next day, Pam left a short message: "Since I haven't heard from you, I guess I'll be camping out on your doorstep next week. Hey, don't worry, I'm bringing a pillow. See you Friday." She wouldn't actually do that, would she? I thought. But as the week dragged on, I realized I'd be happy to see her again. Pam was amazing, and despite my reluctance to revisit the past, she wasn't taking no for an answer. By Thursday, I was anxious, and by Friday, I was useless at work. I just watched the clock. "Big date tonight?" Ken asked, walking by my office. What? I snapped out of my daze. Must be some girl to throw you off your game, he laughed. Get out of here, you're no good today. Have a great night, and I'll see you Monday. I left the office, grabbed my company car, and found myself speeding home, heart racing. Calm down, she might not even show, I told myself, easing off the gas. I parked near my building and waited in the car for over an hour, watching the entrance. I made calls, reviewed some proposals, and froze in the cold. Still no sign of her. Frustrated, I decided she was messing with me. As I headed to my condo, I saw Pam sitting on a pillow by my door. Are you always this late? No wonder you have no life, she said, standing up. If it weren't for a kind old lady, I'd still be waiting outside. Aren't you going to invite me in? She asked, holding a sofa pillow. I smiled as I opened the door, and we stepped inside. I nearly froze waiting for you. I don't think I could have lasted much longer, Pam said, tossing her jacket and pillow onto a chair and heading toward the kitchen. Give me a second, I replied, hanging up my coat and loosening my tie. Well, I'm waiting, she said, hands on her hips. For what? I asked, starting the coffee. For an apology for ignoring my calls and leaving me with a million questions. My friends were asking about the psycho I was dating who put 2 guys in the hospital. It didn't happen quite like that, I said. They got off easy. Easy? They were taken away on stretchers, she shot back. Could have been body bags. I replied calmly, you've got serious issues. Let's talk about it over dinner. What's on the menu? Fine. What are you hungry for? I asked. Anything but chicken. I can't eat it after seeing how it's processed. How about beef stir-fry, seafood Alfredo, or steak in peppers? I asked, scanning the freezer. You cook these? She asked. No, I buy them frozen from Tony's. I pick up 6 meals every Monday and heat them up when I'm too busy to cook. But with a kitchen like yours, you don't cook? Only when I have the time or guests, I said. Let's go with frozen meals tonight and discuss breakfast later, she said, finishing her coffee. I chose Alfredo, and she picked stir-fry. She was impressed with my wine cooler, though it only held a few bottles. I just buy what I like, I explained. During dinner, Pam finally asked, when are you going to tell me your story? It's simple. I met Carolyn in college, we got married, had a few good years, and then it fell apart. That's it. I've read more details in Cliff Notes, Pam said. She then shared. Her story began when her mom left when she was a baby. She lived with her grandparents until they died, and then with her dad and his girlfriend until she turned 18. She got a scholarship to art school, but her dad ended up in prison for dealing pills to make ends meet. She waited tables, did portraits, and even modeled for art classes. Some of it caught my attention. It was art, not a strip club, she quickly added. Pam then described her short-lived marriage to Rob, who became controlling. I got pregnant hoping it would bring us closer, but it only made things worse. One night, he accused me of cheating and pushed me down the stairs. I had a miscarriage, and he was arrested for trying to eliminate the baby. Why didn't you just leave him? I interrupted. I was still trying to make it work. You don't walk away when things get tough, she said. Rob ended up convicted of attempted homicide, and I got a quick divorce. So, Steve, you're not the only one with a messy past, she finished, her eyes red. We sat in silence for a couple of minutes, finishing our wine and wondering what was next. I need a shower before bed, Pam said, standing up. Since I didn't bring clothes, I'll have to borrow something of yours. So get moving if you want me in bed tonight, she added with a smile. You can bare your soul tomorrow, she teased, heading to the kitchen with our glasses. I showed her the bathroom. I'll grab you a toothbrush. Need anything else? You're so prepared. This will do for tonight. I'll bring my own stuff next time, if there is a next time, she said, stepping into the shower. While she showered, I laid out everything she might need. I joined her, and after our steamy shower, we dried off and hurried to bed. It had been over a year since I had been with someone. We made love and then lay silently in each other's arms for a while. "One more brownie, then let's call it a night," Pam said softly. We fell asleep together, though she drifted off first. I knew tomorrow would be tough. She'd want answers, especially after opening up to me. I wasn't sure I was ready, but I didn't want her to leave. "God damn it, Carol," I thought bitterly. Pam woke up to sunlight and found me gone. She spotted a note on my pillow, went for a run around the lake. "If I'm not back when you wake up, look for me out on the balcony and yell." "What is he, crazy?" Pam muttered, wrapping herself in a blanket. She checked outside and saw it was freezing. Shaking her head at the idea of running in that weather, she sat by the balcony doors and waited. About 15 minutes later, she spotted me running. "Hey, sailor, you want to get laid?" she yelled, waving. I waved back and headed inside. "How long have you been up?" I asked. "About 20 minutes. Isn't it cold out?" "Not if you keep moving." "Running gives me a morning high," I said, heading to the bathroom. "Give me a minute to shower, then I'll make you breakfast." As I stepped into the shower, Pam followed. "You washed my back, so I'll return the favor," she said with a smile. Between the shower and other activities, breakfast was delayed by over an hour. After 2 showers and plenty of fun, we finally got dressed. "Coffee, tea, or hot chocolate?" I asked. "Coffee sounds perfect," Pam replied. "You've got your choice: pancakes, waffles, omelette, or fruit-filled crepes." "But we only have sausage links," I said. "Sausage links only? Off with his head." Pam laughed. "Let's have crepes today and waffles tomorrow." "Confident, aren't you?" I teased. "Of myself, yes. Of you, not so sure," she replied playfully. "How about breakfast first, then questions, or we could just stay in bed all day?" I suggested. "Let's do both," she smiled. As we ate, I wondered how to share my story without sounding like an idiot. That was delicious. "I didn't realize I was so hungry," Pam said, rubbing her belly. "Any coffee left?" she asked. "Just enough for you," I replied, clearing the dishes. "So, do we start here or in bed?" Pam asked with a grin. "I'd prefer unclothed in bed, but you'll probably distract me. Let's start here, then move to the bedroom. I want the full story, we've got the weekend, so don't leave anything out." She said, "All right. What do you want to know?" I asked, "How long have you had such a hot temper?" Pam pressed, "I don't have one." I said defensively, "But what about that night at the club?" She continued, "That was a long time coming. Dan had it coming for what he did, and I'm just glad I stopped when I did." I replied, "Now I'm confused. Just tell me what I need to know." Pam said, curling up on the couch, "All right." I began, sitting across from her. "Carol and I met at a party Nick and Lisa threw. Neither of us was looking for anything serious. Since Nick and Lisa were getting married, Carol and I kept crossing paths and eventually started dating. She was a party girl, and I often had to pull her out of trouble. She flirted with the wrong guys, which caused problems, so I stopped calling her after 2 weeks. Carol confronted me. "You don't like me anymore?" she asked. I replied, "Carol, if you're with me, you're with me only. I'm tired of you flirting with everyone." She asked, "So are we exclusive now?" I said, "Yeah, I guess so." From then on, we were a couple. At Nick and Lisa's wedding, Carol said ours would be more casual. 2 years later, we got married, set up a home, and life was good. We both had decent jobs and had fun, but in our 3rd year, things changed. One night, Carol asked if I had any fantasies I wanted to act on. For her birthday, she wanted a fantasy night where she'd be tied to the bed and pleased until she cried enough. I got into it and prepared everything: silk ties, chocolate, whipped cream. On her birthday, I set up the room with candles and told her the safe word was pepper. For hours, I pleased her until she finally yelled pepper. It was a fun, passionate night. Pam asked, "What did you get for your birthday?" I replied, "For her birthday, I bought her a ZXI outfit, and we played a role-play game. I sent her to a bar, watched guys try to pick her up, and then walked in pretending to be her pimp. Afterward, we had dinner at a nice restaurant and then went home for a night of great ZX. The following year, for her birthday, I was supposed to be her slave for the night. It didn't go well. We went to a dance club, and I spent the evening fetching drinks while guys hit on her. That's when I met Dan and his buddy Tim. They danced with Carol and flirted with her all night. Dan even handed me $20 and said, "Get us another round, boy." Carol backed him up, saying, "You promised, just go get the drink." When I returned, Dan and Carol were grinding on the dance floor. Furious, I told her it was time to leave, but Dan shouted, "Why don't you wait in the car, boy?" I grabbed Carol and said, "Pepper, the safe word." She finally agreed to leave but kissed both guys on the cheek before we went. The ride home was silent. When we got back, Carol said, "That was fun." Fun? I was humiliated. "You danced like a cheap hooker, letting those guys paw at you," I said angrily. "What if I had done the same thing with some girl while you sat there waiting for your turn?" "It was just a joke, a fantasy," Carol insisted. But I was too upset to listen. "You went too far," I told her, pouring drink after drink. "I almost punched that guy when she tried to touch me. Don't touch me until you get the stink of those guys off you." Carol went to bed, and I passed out on the couch. The next morning, I woke up hungover with an empty bottle of Jack Daniels. For the next 2 days, we barely spoke until she finally blew up at dinner. "Get over it, Steve." I pushed it too far, but no one got hurt, and we're still married. "What's the big deal?" she shouted. "Fine, for my birthday, I want to meet Ada with 2 other women," I said. "You mean me and another woman?" she asked. "No, me and 2 other women, and you just get to watch," I replied. "Okay, if that's what you want," she said. I packed my bags and told her, "I'll call and tell you where to send the rest of my stuff. I'm not into sharing or swinging, Carol." I left, hearing her scream something as I walked out. I ended up at a Holiday Inn bar, where Nick found me. "Want me to tell her I found you?" he asked. "Not yet. We have different ideas about what being unfaithful means, and I'm doubting my marriage," I said, downing another beer. Nick said, "She's only upset because I won't go along with her. She was dry humping those guys while they called me boy, and she doesn't think she did anything wrong." Nick joked, "Well, I guess you won't be trying that fantasy again," but quickly realized it wasn't funny. "Sorry, bad joke. But you're not really leaving her, are you?" "Not this time, but if it happens again, I'm done," I replied. After a couple of days, I went home, and the makeup ZX was incredible. Things were fine until my next birthday. "Ready for that menage Ada?" Carol teased. "I found 2 hot babes," I said, frustrated. It was a joke. She then suggested a couple's massage by another couple instead. The massage began with both of us lying side by side on the bed, close enough to touch but not kiss. The woman was stunning, and the guy looked like a Greek god. Both were barely dressed and oiled. We weren't allowed to touch them. As I felt the woman's hands on my back, I suddenly realized the guy was massaging Carol. That's when I ended the session. Carol looked disappointed, clearly enjoying herself. I paid the couple and sent them on their way. When I got back, Carol smiled. "That was interesting. Didn't like your massage?" I didn't speak to her for the rest of the day. The next morning at breakfast, I asked, "Was getting massaged by a guy one of your fantasies?" "I thought it was my birthday gift," she replied. We both had our fun, and no damage was done. Looking back, I regret not speaking up then. My silence made her think I was okay with it. I told her we should stop with the fantasies, but by then, the damage was done. She believed. She could do whatever she wanted without consequences. After 2 hours of talking, I was thirsty, so I grabbed a glass of juice and sat next to Pam. Things got out of hand. I admitted it, and Pam shrugged. We've all done things in the heat of the moment. It's human nature. We debated dinner options and ended up at an Italian restaurant. Over wine, Pam said, "It doesn't sound like the worst marriage ever." What she did later was much worse. "I'll tell you after dinner," I replied as our food arrived. On the cold walk home, I continued, "Carol wouldn't tell me her plans for her next birthday. She just said it would be a night to remember." By Friday, I still didn't know what she had in mind. After dinner, she led me to the bedroom, undressed me, and tied me up with handcuffs and leather straps. It was supposed to be fun, but then I heard the doorbell ring. My heart raced, terrified it might be Nick and Lisa. It wasn't them. Pam and I reached my condo, and she protested when I stopped. "Finish the story," she said, settling on the couch. "I need a drink first," I replied, grabbing 2 Coronas. "I've never told anyone about that night, and it's going to put me in a bad mood." "You don't have to if you don't want to," Pam reassured me. "No, it's time I unload this. I just don't want to drive you away again." "I'm not going anywhere," Pam said. "All right, just be warned," I replied. There I was on the bed when I heard voices. I should have called out the safe word, Pepper, but curiosity got the best of me. I heard them head to the spare bedroom, and after waiting 10 to 15 minutes, I started calling Carol's name, getting louder each time. Eventually, I screamed. 15 seconds later, my world fell apart. Dan, unclothed, walked in and taped my mouth shut. "That'll keep you quiet while Tim and I have fun," he sneered. "You really are a cock. This is too much for you, but don't worry, we'll take good care of her." He tossed the handcuff keys on the dresser, taunting me, then left. I screamed into the tape and fought the restraints, hearing Carol scream in the distance. I struggled for what felt like hours until I physically couldn't move. Dan eventually returned, slapping my face. "I just had wild sex with your wife, and she loved every minute. We should do this again," he mocked. After he left, I thrashed until the bed collapsed. I lay there, drained and unable to move. I heard the front door close and the shower running. I felt dead inside. At some point, Carol came in, screaming when she saw me. She freed me, babbling apologies about how Dan was supposed to release me. My hands and feet were bloody, but all I could see were the hickeys covering her body. I lost control for a moment, raising my voice and causing a mess in the bedroom as I angrily threw things around. I stormed into the guest room, saw the messed up bed, and started destroying their room too. Then I felt an electric shock. After the third jolt, everything went black. I woke up in a hospital room, restrained. A nurse sat nearby and explained I was in Memorial Hospital, brought in the night before. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Tired, and my hands hurt," I replied. "You lost a lot of skin, but you'll live," she said before leaving. The doctor came in next. "You look better today." "I'll remove the restraints," he said. "You have scars, but they'll fade over time. You're free to go, but you'll need pain medication and ointment for your hands. The police say no charges were filed." "Oh, and you don't have any clothes." "That's fine, I'll call a friend," I assured him. Nick brought me clothes and asked what happened last night. Carol came to our place crying, saying it all went wrong. "Nick, listen carefully. Don't ever mention last night or Carol again," I warned him. "If you do, you'll never see me again. Now please just drive me home. No more talking." We drove the rest of the way in silence. I knew Nick had a lot of questions, but I wasn't in the mood to talk. I thanked him as I got out and headed into my building. Without a key, I went to the manager's apartment and asked him to let me in. Mr. Kelly opened the door, and we stepped into a mess, furniture and clothes everywhere. "Steve, I'm not throwing you out, but you need to find a new place within 90 days. "I'm sorry," he said before leaving. I crashed on the couch that night, still in my clothes. The next morning, I surveyed the damage. The bedroom furniture was trashed, and Carol's clothes were scattered everywhere. I made coffee, then found my phone buried under a pile of stuff. I had 3 missed calls from Carol. I turned off the phone and unplugged all the others except for the kitchen one, which had an answering machine. As I finished my second cup of coffee, the phone rang. The answering machine picked up. "Steve, I know you're there. Please call me. What happened wasn't supposed to happen like that. I'm scared to come home." "I love you," Carol's voice said. Ignoring it, I decided to take a shower, wrapping my wrists to protect the wounds. Afterwards, I made a shopping list and headed out. I picked up my prescriptions, medical supplies for my wrists and ankles, some lawn bags, and hit the ATM to withdraw the maximum allowed from both our accounts. I also canceled my Sprint account and opened a new one with a locked number. My last stop was the liquor store for some Coronas. Back home, I found more messages, 2 from Carol and 1 from Lisa. I deleted Carol's and listened to Lisa's message. She said she was coming by at 7 o'clock to pick up a few things for Carol. Looking at the time, I realized I had 2 hours to get things ready. I filled 12 bags with Carol's clothes, shoes, and other belongings. After a break and a couple of beers, I finished by peeing in each bag. When Lisa and Nick arrived, Lisa asked, "What's all this?" "This is all of Carol's stuff," I replied. "I just came for a few outfits," Lisa said. "I'm being asked to move out and I'm not taking Carol with me. She can come for the rest of her things later." I told her, "Shouldn't you two talk it over?" Lisa suggested, "Not a chance." I responded, "Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got beers to finish and plan to get some sleep unless Carol tries to get me arrested again." They left with what they could carry, and I flipped the blood-stained mattress, crashing for the night. The next morning, I woke up at 9 o'clock in pain. I took some painkillers with the last of my beer and went back to sleep. That's how I spent the weekend, drifting in and out of sleep. I called my boss and requested the week off, explaining I'd been in an accident. He was understanding and gave me the time I needed. It seemed like the wreckage of my marriage was reason enough. On Monday, I finished what I started. I withdrew half the money from our joint savings and checking accounts, opened a new account in my name, and signed paperwork to remove myself from our shared accounts. Though it would take 7 days to process, I canceled our joint credit cards, paid off half of the ones with a balance, and updated my HR records to remove Carol as the beneficiary of my 401k and life insurance. It was a productive day. The rest of the week, I searched for a new place to live. Since my time was limited, Carol, after weeks of me ignoring her calls, started emailing me constantly. I didn't know why she didn't just stop by, but maybe she remembered the last confrontation. Finally, I replied to one of her emails, "Our marriage is over, Carol. Please leave me alone. I hope your night with Dan and Tim was worth it." To my surprise, she replied, "I'm so sorry. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Dan told me he let you go and that you left. I wasn't thinking clearly. We smoked a few joints. I'll give you some space. I really love and miss you." I finished my beer and said to Pam, "Now you know my night from hell. I still hate her more than you can imagine." "So that's why you went after Dan? What happened to Tim?" Pam asked. "I hired a private detective a month ago. I know where he works, lives, and his gym schedule. After dealing with Dan, I'm not sure where he is now." I replied, still trying to calm down. "Steve, why bother with Tim? Dan was the main problem, and he's out of the picture. I need to close this chapter, starting with Tim and ending with Carol." I said, "You're scaring me. You're not thinking about hurting Carol, are you? After what you did to Dan, you'll end up in jail." "I won't hurt her physically. Physical pain fades. She deserves much more. She will pay," I said, pacing angrily. "Steve, let it go. You're not divorced yet, but you're practically free. Just sign the papers and move on, Pam pleaded. I can't let her off that easily. She has to pay for what she did, I shouted with a wild look in my eyes. Steve, I don't like this side of you. You don't forgive, you just want revenge. If you go through with this, we're done, Pam said, grabbing her coat. Don't call me after this is over. Goodbye, Pam. I muttered as she left. 2 weeks later, I confronted Tim as he opened his apartment door. We need to talk, I said, pushing him inside. Look, it was all Dan, he babbled. Carol set everything up. We were supposed to let you join in. I didn't know you were still tied up until we were leaving. I'm sorry, man. Please just leave me alone. My birthday is in 2 weeks. I want you gone by then. If you're still here, I'll make sure you never have sex again. Got it? Tim nodded, terrified. 2 weeks, I said, leaving. One down, one to go. For $8,000, I got my birthday present. The day before, I received an email, it's all set for 9:30 a.m. I went to work on Wednesday in the best mood I'd had in a long time. Everyone wished me a happy birthday, and there was even a cake. Later, my boss took me out for dinner, and I didn't get home until almost 8 p.m. My answering machine was blinking with 25 messages, but I deleted them all. I grabbed a Corona and waited for what I knew was coming. Just before 9 o'clock, there was loud pounding on my door. I sat down with my beer, took a deep breath, and answered it. Asshole! Carol screamed as Nick held her back. Good evening, street hooker. How have you been? I responded calmly. How could you send that video to my parents and friends? She cried, starting to sob. What video? Maybe if you describe it, I'll know which one you mean, I replied sarcastically. God damn you, Steve. Do you hate me that much that you'd ruin my life like this? She yelled, angry and tearful. Oh, you mean the sex tape? I said mockingly. The one labeled Carol Moore is a street hooker and cheats on her husband? I not only saw it, I lived it. I rolled up my sleeves, showing my scars. See these? They're a daily reminder of what you did. Should I hate you? Absolutely. You destroyed our marriage. Did you know, Carol? At first, I thought Dan and Tim were hurting you. I would have cut off my hands to save you. That's how much I loved you. But you set it all up with them and even let them tape it. She sobbed harder as I continued, your parents, our friends, they all blamed me for the breakup. Maybe now, after watching the tape, they'll understand. Or maybe they won't. I don't care anymore. I was sorry. I tried to talk to you, but you wouldn't listen. She cried, sorry. I sneered. You mean sorry I planned my fantasy of getting screwed by other men while tying up my husband? I should have left you that night. Steve, you went too far, Nick interrupted, looking serious. Have you watched the tape? No, I haven't, he replied. That's because I didn't send it to you and Lisa. I didn't want to drag you into it. But if you think I'm wrong, watch the tape. Then imagine it was Lisa, and I spent over 3 hours trying to save her, thinking she was in danger. Then tell me what you'd do. I stared at him, making sure he understood. Carol kept sobbing, and I turned back to her. If anything on that tape isn't true, I'll send a retraction. If not, it is what it is. And just to part on a good note, I've got a little gift for you, I said, handing her a manila envelope with the divorce papers, signed, notarized, and delivered. If you don't mind, I've got things to do. The sex was nice, but the rest of the marriage was garbage. I shut the door and leaned against it, knowing it was finally over. I had hired a hacker to send the tape to her parents and all the friends who had taken her side. I could have sent it to her work, her parents' church, or even the world, but I didn't. I just posted it on 2 adult sites, figuring the income would cover the hacker fee. Carol threatened court, but nothing happened. The tape had been routed through overseas sites, making it untraceable. 3 weeks later, I got a short email from her parents, "We're sorry we never knew." Some old friends tried to apologize, but I didn't respond. The tape spread quickly, and Carol became infamous. She quit her job and moved away. Within a month, people at work saw the tape but never said anything. They saw me as the sufferer. 2 months later, Nick reached out. He'd seen the tape and admitted he might have done the same thing, but to keep peace in his family, we couldn't hang out for a while. I understood. I had lost Pam and Nick, at least temporarily. I started dating again. About 4 months after that night, I ran into Pam at a downtown club. She was with friends but eventually came over. "Hi, Steve. How are you?" she asked. "Never better," I replied. "I heard what happened and saw part of the tape online," she said. "You had no idea when you judged me," I cut her off. "You thought I was just some crazy guy trying to ruin his ex-wife's life. Well, you made your choice. Maybe we could talk sometime," she suggested. "Pam, I really liked you, but it wasn't enough. You've got too much baggage for me now," I said bluntly. "My date is coming back." I nodded toward a redhead approaching. "Take care, Pam. I hope you find someone who meets your high standards," I said as I kissed Tammy when she reached our table. "Not introducing me?" Tammy asked. "Tammy, this is Pam. We were in a relationship before," I explained. "Pam, he's with me now." "Good men are rare," Tammy replied with conviction. Pam gave a terse greeting as Tammy indicated we should go. I hugged Pam and whispered, "I was really starting to care for you. It took me a long time to move on. It's a pity you didn't get that." I kissed her on the cheek and left with Tammy. Pam watched us go and murmured, "If only things had been different."